The vote in the United States Senate. Joining me now, Republican Senator Judd Gregg from New Hampshire. He is the ranking member of the Budget Committee, retiring. So this is one of his last big weeks casting votes. Senator Gregg, have you already cast a vote on this bill?
I have. Yes, I did. I voted for the bill. I voted for cloture. We won't vote for the bill probably till tomorrow, but I did vote to move the bill forward.
How many amendments do you expect to see talked about here? I know we don't really have the bill is sort of being put together as we speak ad hoc. Walk us through the process a little bit over the next 24 hours.
Well, there won't be any amendments. The agreement is reached. It's an agreement which both sides have signed off on, the President and the leadership of the Congress. And when you get that sort of an agreement, if you start amending it, you basically agreements become unraveled. So I don't expect there to be any changes to this. I think it is the way it is. I have some reservations about it. Some of it gives me very serious angst. But as a very practical matter, government is the business of compromising. You can't govern unless you do compromise, especially if you're in a divided government. And as a result, this is an agreement that on balance is a good decision. We do not want to raise taxes in an economic situation like we presently have, because it would probably lead to another significant slowdown of our economy.
Do you think, one of the arguments that some on the left have made that's saying, look, by agreeing to another 2-year extension, the reality is, you know what, it's going to be impossible to mess with the tax code. It's just politically untenable, because clearly every time you get to the point where you can do something about it, everybody backs off.
Well, I think that's ridiculous. The fact is that we have a lot of proposals floating around this chamber right now, one sponsored by myself and Senator Wyden, who's a progressive from Oregon, which fundamentally changed the debate on tax reform. We, instead of talking about raising the rates from 35 to 39% or 39 to 42%, what we do is move into an entirely different arena. We say, let's reduce a lot of deductions and exemptions, and therefore takes the rates down for everybody, and create a tax law which is fairer, simpler, progressive, still progressive, but incentivizes people to go out and be productive rather than incentivizing people to go out and invest to avoid taxes. And in addition, our proposal was put on steroids by Erskine Bowles and Alan Simpson under their commission, which said, let's go to a zero option where you take the rates to 8, 13, 15, and 21 or 23 by eliminating all deductions and exemptions. So I believe in the next year you're going to see this debate of fundamental tax reform be the focal point, and I suspect the President will engage in it. I hope he does. And I know that House and Senate Republicans are ready to go forward, and people like Senator Wyden on the other side of the aisle certainly is.
I have to say I have some cynics, particularly among some Republicans that I've talked to, that says, you know what, in a presidential cycle, as much as tax reform, which is a lot of Republicans and Democrats both want to do this in some form, that are both quietly, I'm sure, tell you, go, keep doing it, keep doing it. But I got a lot of cynical Republican aides who tell me, you know what, not in a presidential election cycle. What do you say to that?
I say that they're cynics and they're wrong. This country is on an unsustainable fiscal path. We know that. We know that we're going to have to control out-year spending. We know we're going to have to address the entitlements. But we also know if we're going to get this economy going, really going, we've got to create a tax law that people believe is fair, simple, and oriented towards capital formation and progressive. And as a result, fundamental tax reform is really the linchpin of getting a hold of our long-term economic problems in this country. So I genuinely believe that you're going to see a development on both sides of the aisle of conscientious members of the Congress coming together, if they get presidential leadership, around fundamental tax reform.
I want to ask you about the health care law. Are you one of those that believes that if the mandate is somehow struck down, that it unravels the entire health care law, or that it's simply, okay, the mandate's going to have to be stepped aside and Congress is going to have to step in and fill that gap?
Well, most of that health care bill pivoted off the mandate. Now, the business side mandate was not struck down. The individual side was. I don't know how this is all going to sort out, and I don't think anybody really does. But it's pretty obvious if you read that bill that most of the policy in that bill pivoted off the individual mandate. And it's going to be difficult to see how this bill, which I think was going to be a disaster anyway, is going to work at all without that element in it, which was actually at its core.
Right. Well, I got to ask you about the mandate in particular, because when it comes to health insurance, at some point that's been part of the problem, right? How do you get everybody insured?
Right.
So can you do that via incentives, or don't you at some point have to whether it's a mandate, whether it's taxation, because this is that's the one part, obviously, of this bill. The whole bill was not struck down, just this part. But how do you do that? It seemed that there were a lot of, I think, in Wyden Gregg, in your health care proposal, right? You guys worked together on that. Wasn't that one of the ideas? It was Wyden Bennett. But that was one of the ideas, was a mandate.
Yes, you're right. But the difference was this: it wasn't comprehensive, all-intensive health care for the purposes of moving down the road towards a single-payer system. There are ways to do this. Let me suggest one. I mean, there are a lot, but let me suggest one. Let's put in place in this country a requirement that people buy catastrophic coverage and then subsidize low-income individuals so they can get it, so that people aren't wiped out. They don't lose their homes, they don't lose all their assets because somebody in the family gets sick. But you allow the marketplace to work underneath the catastrophic event by creating an atmosphere where people will go out and buy different competitive policies or have health savings accounts in order to do that. There are all sorts of variations which would have been much more efficient, gotten you much better health care, had much better health care practices, so we moved to a health care system which rewarded quality and quantity versus quality rather than quantity and utilization. That could have been done. This bill did not, because this bill basically had as its primary goal, in my opinion, to move down the road towards a single-payer system.
All right. Judd Gregg, retiring Republican senator from New Hampshire, ranking member of the Budget Committee, a member of Erskine. Seems like you've been a part of all of these debates over the last 6 months. I have a feeling you're coming to a presidential commission very soon. You're going to get roped back into this before you know it, Senator.
Well, we got to do something. I'll be happy to put my oar in if people think I can be helpful. Thank you.
All righty, Senator Gregg, thanks very much.